I am live. Hi, this is On Imagination with the Healing Garden, and welcome to Philosophical Coffee. Another morning where I forgot that I had my computer shut down last night. So, if you are new to my if you are new to my channel, I am different. I am a scientist who maps the internal expanse. I was up until like 1 a.m. last night, midnight, writing the theory of love. And I started to go through the 12 ethical stages of perspective growth. And I have not yet written out the 12 stages, not on there anyway, they're on my website. And I'm going, do I just transfer data from my website over to the book? Nah, that feels like cheating. So I'm currently writing out the layout of the book. And I decided while I was laying in bed this morning that I'm going to do two variations of it. Not variations, but I'm going to have, this is the educational stuff. This is the stuff you need to know for the understanding. This is the workbook, and I'm going to call the workbook Journey into the Self, which I really love. So, and it's where all the stuff is applied. So I've decided not to turn Theory of Love into a workbook. I was going to try and do exercises and put stuff in place, but I'm looking at it going, no, it really just needs to be the theory and then the actual. It's not really a workbook. It's a full, it's a course in a book form. I really don't want to call it a workbook. And then I'm going to do the parent, the teacher, basically a whole nother one on education and learning. And I've been doing a lot of stuff lately, and I'm just there are cycles to everything, cycles to learning, cycles to progress, cycles to growth, and most people are completely unaware of the cycles. And as a result, when we get into a very normal cycle, a normal spot in our cycle, we think there's something wrong with us, and it's not. It's just part of the cycle. The most common one is either the sea drop, when everything's just, when it rains, it pours, and that's the rain part. And then there's the other days where you're not making any progress. It's those low points in the cycle. And it's because physics, everything is a swinging pendulum back and forth. And we have almost no tolerance for the moments where it's in a low point. I have no plans for talking today. I want to be here, but I'm not sure quite yet what I want to talk about. I'm feeling not frustrated. I don't know. I had one of those moments in my work last night where I have these realizations of the epiphany of the scope of what I'm doing. And when I see it, it's an existential, it's a little mini existential crisis every time. That's what it is. Every time I get the scope of what I'm doing, there's me in it working on the details. And then there's me transferring it over to people. And I do the same pattern every day. And it's finally solid and it's stable and I love it. But then I get to this one point where it's, all right, now it's time to go omniscient and look at the big picture. And I went omniscient last night to look at the big picture and I could see a lot. And it was a very difficult night. So I am waiting for feelings to show up to tell me what it is I'm going to be talking about today. We have something called our self-sailing system. And despite all the theory, this is the theory, but really this is what's at the forefront. This is really what people need to know about. All my work can be summarized with a self-sailing system, but a lot of people need to understand how it gets there. And then there's those people who are like, I don't care how the theory, just give me how it works. But then there's scientists who are going, yeah, we want the theory and the proof. So, and the process has been extraordinary for this. It was something doesn't feel right. Something feels wrong, which is just me picking up on all the illogic. And then from there, it is the exploration and the logical proof. Actually, I use logic to explore. And as I lay out the logical proof, I then, when I'm done, have a conclusion, which means I have an answer. And then from there, I check it with logic. I do reverse logic called checks and balances. And then this is where most logicians stop. This is where all logicians stop. Or this is where a lot of philosophers stop. But me, no, I want to prove it. So I go over to math, physics, and science, and I prove it. So I have the logical proof, and then I have the mathematical proof, and then I have the physics, the physics to, I use the laws of physics to tie it all in. So it's not deniable. And then from there, I pull into the translation. Do I summarize it first? This is where it gets a little sticky because there's translation where I present it to my, it's almost like I have an editor, a beta reader, where this is where I'll have the panel discussion. This is where I have panel discussions with my people, and I'll deliver it to them, but then I'll summarize it. There, I summarize it first, and then I translate it over to common perspective. There it is. That's when I translate it. And then after I translate it, I turn it into an educational story. And I deliver it. So that is my process. One moment. That is my process. And I do that with everything. And I'm at a point when people give me new material. I can see right away, I'll start looking at it, and with about 5 minutes, I can go, oh no, I can see the illogic, and it's like, no, there's too much poor logic in that. I have to do my own stuff. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, I'm loving my work right now. Maybe I just need a day off. Maybe that's why I'm not. I don't rest. There's no, yeah, I need a day off. Maybe that's what it is I still want to be here. I still want to chill, but I think I'm going to do a casual day to day where I'm just kind of like, yeah, I don't want to. I was working on math last night, and every single thing in our educational system is set up to assault the memories. You are not supposed to be using your memories to, with the exception of actors, ironically, not even, no, because improv, no. You're not supposed to be assaulting your memory. Memory is something completely different. And somebody somewhere said, hey, instead of teaching identity and subconscious mind, logic and story, let's just force people to memorize stuff. And it's an assault on the memory, where you're forcing data into your mind via repetition and memorization. And that is not learning. Learning is not memorizing. It is not. And I've talked about bad teacher in the past. And the very first rule is, let's ask the question, what is learning? Learning is when you internalize it to the point of comprehension through your identity, story, and your logic subconscious mind. That's the very first lesson of learning. And every teacher has failed. Every teacher has failed this. Is this a quantifier? Is this worthy of a quantifier? I think there is a rare exception. A rare exception. The majority of teachers have failed this. Most teachers don't teach. What they do is forced memorization. Memorizing is not learning. Memorizing isn't even, it's just parroting. There's no individuality to it. There's no art. There's no imagination. There's no thought to it. There's no comprehension. It is literally an idiot savant. But not even, it's less than that. It's a drone. It's a mindless drone. I remember when I was a child, I could read something, I could watch a movie twice and have it memorized in completion. I forgot I could do that. By the time I was 8 and 10 years old, I could watch a movie twice and have the full thing memorized. And it's a skill I lost, when my trauma picked up and when my amnesia picked up from the subconscious mind. So I wasn't able to do it after that. But it wasn't authentic. It wasn't original. This is actually Robin Williams' problem. He internalized. This is the difference. This is the difference. Robin Williams learned comedy. Other people studied it. Other people memorized it. Robin Williams learned it. When you learn something, you have to improv because you can't repeat. As soon as you really learn it, it is now in your identity and in your subconscious mind. That is actually where we learn. When you memorize, that's not learning. There's no comprehension. Comprehension comes from the subconscious mind. And there's no order of events. There's no order of events. So there's no understanding it. And because your identity and your subconscious mind are not being exercised, and your memorization might get really good, but you'll never be more than just a parrot. Whereas with the identity and the subconscious mind, welcome to the world of creation. Now you're creating, you're learning, and you're improvising. You can't be both. You can't. You cannot. You either have to be the author or you have to be the actor. Now, if you are Robin Williams, in the case of an authoring actor, you're going to piss off the script writers, which is what happened with Robin Williams, because he could not parrot, because he had learned comedy and theater so well that he had to improvise. He couldn't comprehend not to, because he tapped into that author side, because he learned it. One of the things with public speaking is you can improv it or you can write the script and memorize the script. Most people memorize scripts. I can't do that. Oh my God, I can't do it. I could when I was 8, 10 years old, watch an entire movie twice, and there you go. I think one movie I had it down once. But identity was so tuned in. I still have to go back and figure out what took place there that I could pull that off. That is interesting. I almost want to say, no, that wasn't memorization. That was an eidetic memory. That's what that was. That was story. That wasn't memorization. That was story. That was loving story so much that identity decided to put it in her memory. And that's actually what memory is for. You're supposed to explore or experience something, and it's so joyous that you just remember it. Like receiving something, or like the day your child is born, you remember that day because there is so much hormone, so much happiness, so much joy with identity that she's taking it all in. So she's internalizing it through story. Internalized story. And the one movie I know of that, I watched it and I memorized it on the first run through. It wasn't memorizing, it was the internalized story. I loved that thing so much. I watched it once and boom, I was quoting it. I remember I have this memory of me, and it's so funny because even a week later, I was standing there at a family reunion with my aunt, and I was literally going through the whole movie with her, verbatim, like I was performing the movie. And and she was like, "How many times did you see this?" And I'm like, "Once." And she's like, so it was like, that's not memorizing though. That's internalized story. I just saw the story. Whereas with memorizing, that's when you sit down and now with music, I do this with music. With music, I am one of those persons that plays the same song for 3 months. So that's memorizing when you just over and over again. I'm in love with my car. So that's there. That's constantly going in my head. But that's not learning because you're not taking it in through story or logic. You're just parroting. And we teach our teachers that this is learning, that this parroting is learning, and it's not. It's a mindless drone. So this is where you have a lot of actors who they'll memorize it, but they can't improvise. And improvisation only comes from internalization, which only comes from actual learning. They're not learning a script, they're memorizing a script. There's a difference. Robin would learn a script. And that's why he couldn't not improvise. It's extraordinary. And right now I am in the process of converting my work over into story format, story and logic. The logic is set, and now I'm turning it over into a story format. And then I'm going to be, and that's where I am in my massive process of overall, I'm at that point where I'm translating, I'm summarizing it. That is the stage I'm in now. I'm in the summarizing stage. That's where I'm writing the book. I'm summarizing my logical work. And then and I'm also translating it over into, no, I'm not translating it over into common perspective. That's next. Because I was writing it last night and I'm like, this is not in the common perspective. Oh, well, I'm just going to write it. I'm going to summarize it. Then I have to translate it over into the common perspective. And then from there, I'm going to be translating it over into the story and then the delivery. So I've got that. And when I do these videos, I'm anywhere from the exploration. This is where my podcast is the exploration. And it's the entire, I have a feeling today, all the way down to the translation. Yeah, it's right down to the panel discussion. So my podcast covers everything from I have something new to explore today all the way down to the part where I do a panel discussion with people to review my thoughts. It's in review because I love to see how my work ties in with the logical proofs. You know, it's interesting. I don't have a single hypothesis prior to working. This is something that I notice over and over again. I don't begin with an hypothesis. I begin with a question, and then I seek to answer the question. Whereas, and this is where you get bad logic. This is really bad logic, is when you start off with a hypothesis or a theory, and then you seek to answer your question. You don't seek to answer the question. You seek to prove your question. Such an ass backwards, illogical way of doing it, because now you have confirmation bias. It's literally setting you up for failure because you're literally starting off with a hypothesis. You should not have a hypothesis. Not at all. Not at all. And I see so many scientists where they'll put the hypothesis first. And I'm like, what are you doing? You do not start off with the thesis and the hypothesis. Now, when you look at an abstract, it starts off with this is the thesis, this is the hypothesis, and then this is the abstract. So because of parroting, they see that and they think, oh, hypothesis theory comes first. No, that's the in conclusion. So I start off with a question, and then you seek to find the answer. You're an unknown. When you put the hypothesis first, you're going into the exploration and the logic with intent to prove. Now, because you are wanting to prove, you are desiring your outcome. So you're going to subconsciously mind alter whatever you need to get the desired outcome, confirmation bias. Never go into a logical proof with an hypothesis or a theory. Never do it. Never do it. You want an open mind, curiosity, question student. And this is where scientists really fuck this up in the lab. And some of them have it right, some of them have it wrong. But it's every time I see a scientist going in with a preconceived hypothesis, it's you must abandon all prejudice or you're going to get altered data when it's all done and said. So the self-sailing system is basically what you want, what feels good, what feels right, and what gives you joy. And then it's listening to your gut, telling you when to do what, where, when, and if you're on the right path. That's it. That is exactly it. That's where everyone should be. That's where you really want to get to. And the problem is you've got all this other stuff in the way, and a lot of people like to bully their way through it. Some people like to push their way through it. This I see a lot of where people are like, oh no, I'm going to just do my self-sailing system. And I'm going, okay. But then they express all their complications, all their mental illnesses, all the things that are in their way. And I'm going, yeah, you're not going to be able to self-sail until you clean the engine room. And that's really it. Is there's people who are trying to self-sail and they figured that out, but they're like, I don't want to bother with any of the engine room. So they've got a really an unmaintenanced engine, and they're trying to do the self-sailing system. So the subconscious mind's constantly getting in the way. And as a result, they're constantly getting derailed. And this is where we are not, it's what I call fractionalized healing. And a lot of people do it where they'll go in and they will say things like, oh, well, I do holistic or I do meditation, but I don't want to bother with anything else. Well, you've got 3 parts of your subconscious mind, 3 parts to you. And if you're just doing holistic and if you're just doing the self-sailing system, you are ignoring the engine big time. And you are ignoring your logic health and your story health. If you're only going to do a third of your healing, you're only going to be a third of the way done. And that's what a lot of people are doing, is they're doing fractionalized healing. And I remember this one person, he was like, I don't need any healing, I'm good. And I'm going, okay, all right. So what are you doing? And he's like, well, I meditate and I do this thing. And he explained a couple of the things he's done. And I'm going, how long have you been doing that? 14 years. 14 years. Years? We have a really messed up way of what we think healing is. It's so normal to take 20 years to heal that everyone thinks that it's supposed to be that way. No, no, no. When it's done right, it should take you 1 month, 30 to 90 days. 30 to 90 days when it's done right. If you do all of it. Most people are not willing to do all of it. 30 to 90 days. So, to give you an idea how bad it can get, in this person's case, 30 to 90 days and 14 years. Clearly, it's not working. And it's because he started something 14 years ago and he has no map, no destination, no compass. He's drifting. He's been drifting. I'm going to call it something like drifted healing is what it is. And it's not healing at all. It's drifting. Drifted healing. It's a great thing to put down on paper. Drifted healing. And everybody is drifting healing. I see very few people doing anything but drifted healing. And they'll, oh, I got it under control. Do you? And then I'll ask them, well, how long have you been doing it? And then they'll tell me what they're doing. And most of it's just holistic. Some people are on medications. Some people are doing the talk therapy. So the blind is leading the blind in that case. And it's like, yeah, there's a whole school of knowing when you need to heal, knowing if you need healing, knowing when you need to heal. And then there's, so you're healing. How is your current plan working for you? And it's this comprehension of, yeah, it's a mess right now. It's a mess right now. It's one of the things I'm working on is doing like a whole quiz, basically, so that people can just go through and get a better idea of how's your healing going. Because one of the huge things I'm seeing is people who don't think they need healing when they do. One person was describing in detail narcissism, his narcissistic behavior, and he thought everything was fine. He was very kind. He was in stage 1, but he was enabling a narcissist, and he was elaborating on that. And I'm listening to him talk, and I'm like, dude, you're literally nurturing a narcissistic relationship. Did not say this to him, but I'm listening to him and I'm like, and he had no clue. It's literally a lot of ignorant people, uninformed people, making a lot of uneducated assumptions and then thinking they're okay. And it's like, okay, all right. Yeah. So I'm going to be doing, I know how I'm going to do that. I'm going to be doing like this whole, let's talk about your healing journey. Let's talk about your healing plan. Because that is a huge, there's what we see being done, what's practiced, what's been done since the 1980s. And then there's the bullshit of, oh, well, everyone always needs to be healing all the time, forever. Well, no, that's pharmaceutical propaganda. So you'll keep buying their shit. You've been hoodwinked. We all have. So it's, yeah, like I can't tell you how common it is for therapists to tell you when you walk in, oh, you're going to be here forever. I am? No, that way you won't question that it's not working. I want to write that one down. You're going to be here forever. That way you won't question that it's not working. I still trying to grapple my head around certain things. No, I think I know what it is I just had, yeah, I had an upload of just information and it's curious about something. Yeah, I'm really, Trying to figure out what to talk about today. And I'm just not feeling it. I am feeling it. I do want to be here. I want to be here. I promise you, I want to be here. But it's just really, yeah. It is a feeling of something else entirely. And I can't quite put my name on it or my finger on it. There's a lot of silence that occurs with this. When you tell someone that they will heal forever, they won't question anything or your tactics. When you've been there for 20 years. You're going to be here a long time. They did that with me with my therapy. They were like, yeah, you're going to be here forever. I am? No, I'm not. I'm going to do it right. It's very, very common for people to be told this in therapy. And it's really, really interesting to see the different yeah. Maybe I just need to sit with my silence. It feels like a calm before. It feels like there's no storm. It just feels like the calm before the chaos. Not even chaos. Everything just feels calm. Everything feels really calm. In the seventh perspective, you enter into that place and you don't want to talk. You just stare and you look and you observe and you're just... And there's this point of silence. It's just you in silence. While you just process everything you've taken in. I often wonder, what's the mind doing? What's the brain doing under these periods of silence? Are we filing away the hormones in our brains? I wonder what we're doing. I'm going to Google it. It's got to be online somewhere. Anything to do with the brain is usually online. What is going on in the brain when we have the urge to be silent after learning? State of deep mindfulness. I don't like Quora. I hate Quora. It is garbage. NIM. No, this is NCBI. This is not NIM. National Institute of the Library of Medicine. Okay, yeah, I know where I am. I'm here often. An abstract. I love abstracts. An abstract is a scientific document. Anytime we have information, it's done in an abstract and then it's uploaded into an abstract. I have written many abstracts. I have read many abstracts. I love abstracts. when people argue what's right and what's wrong, and they throw internet quotes around on the internet, I go over to NIM and pull up the abstract, and I'm like, I'm reading the research material. You want to silent an argument faster than fast? Just pull out the abstract. Pulling out the abstract is equivalent to pulling out the patent. There's this one patent that's out there. I'm going to be getting this printed, and it's going to be hanging in my bathroom. It is the patent of the toilet paper roll. And I will have you know that in the patent, this is how it's supposed to go, according to the inventor. And somebody wrote on this meme underneath it, problem solved. Or it was end of discussion. Like, can we stop arguing about this? It's official. So that was like, there, see? That's how it is. Now, I can see the neurodivergent, nonconformist going, I'm going to make it my own and turn the table. So good for you. At least you're consciously aware and it's not out of ignorance anymore. For me, it bothers me if it's done out of ignorance or illogic. But if you're doing it out of artistic expression, go for it. Do it. Yes. Be your own author. So it's not that it bothers me that it's on backwards sometimes. It bothers me that it's done mindlessly. That's my problem. So I like to read patents and I like to read abstracts. That's where I get my stuff from. I don't bullshit. I'm like, no. You want to throw shit around at me? Oh, T.S. Eliot is actually quoted in this abstract. At the still point of the turning world, neither flesh nor fleshless, neither from nor towards, at the still point, there the dance is, but neither arrest nor movement. My God, I love Eliot. This is beautiful. This is beautifully written. What are the phenomenological characteristics? Oh, I'm looking up that word. Phenomenological. It's in philosophy. Phenomenology. Relating to the science. Okay, can we please talk about the word science? Science means to study, and logic or logi means logic of. They are different. Study and logic are not the same thing. And if they had studied logic, they would know this. Hypothesis. The individual who wrote the dictionary did not study logic. Therefore, the majority of the words that are currently defined are logically wrong, and it drives me crazy. Relating to the logic of phenomena as distinct from that of the nature or being. If it's a study, it would be the science. There needs to be another word because study of does not mean. Let's do this. It would be, let's look up the Latin word for study. The Latin word, studia, it's something like that. Word for study. It would be like student. Studium. Okay? Study of. It would be the study of in Latin. That's what we need. What is the study of in Latin? See, now it's saying, oh, you want to study Latin? No! Latin for study of. Don't you dare give me the word logos. I will get mad. See, now here they figured it out, where it's, oh, science and study is the same thing. Latin for student. Of course it is. Discipulus. Of course it is. Oh, discipulus, discipuli, disciple. That is, yes, it is. That is what student means. That's funny. Of course it does. Discipulus. Discipline. A discipline. Discipline, disciple, discipulus, discipuli. I often refer to my people as discipulus. That is my word of choice. I love that word, my discipulus. In fact, discipulus is actually the name I give my generic audience. Hello, discipulus. How are you today, discipulus? And I have discipuli. That is how I discipulus. And logic is argument. That's what logic means. It's actually formal argument. So an argument does not mean arguing. It does not mean angry. In a proper, true argument, there's no emotions. You enter into a case of Spock when you actually do a proper argument. I wish there was a different word for what people do when they get angry and they scream at you and they say they're arguing or having a discussion. What is that? See, there's a word. Let's call that X, because this is an undefined variable. This is the problem. You have discipulus, which is that learning state of, I'm going to be a student and I'm going to be your audience and you teach me. There's a whole lot of power, authority, control happening in that emotional exchange. It's big. I'm not going to talk about that right now. And then in logic, we call it formal argument. And all I can see right now is Monty Python. I'm here to have an argument. Now, come on, Ira. I'm here to have a good argument. Oh, no. You said you're here to have an argument. It's going to cost you extra if you want a good argument. So you have your formal argument. And an argument is just a series of statements in discussion form that leads to a conclusion or comprehension. But that is not what people do. What people do is they soapbox. Soapbox is probably the best thing. And they will claim during their soapbox that they're having an argument, that they're arguing. And it's like, no, that is not an argument. You are being an abusive asshole who's talking down to me and you're screaming. This is abuse. You see what's going on here? When an abuser abuses, the very first thing is they change the language to allow them to keep doing it. This is common. Abusers will alter the language to allow their continued abuse on others. I'm going to write that down. That is like quote worthy. Abusers will alter the language that defines their abuse so they can continue their abuse, so they can keep abusing you. As a result, a lot of our words today are abuser friendly. Yeah, that's one of our really ugly truths that we don't know about. Abusers will alter the language that define their abuse so they can continue their abuse in your ignorance, so they can keep abusing you. As a result, a lot of our words today are abuser friendly, are incorrect, and abuser friendly. Yep. Very, 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 very true. That's a lot of the work I do, is that very thing right there. That really summarizes my work in a nutshell. I like that a lot. That really does a lot to summarize my work, is this idea of what I'm actually dealing with. So when you start to, when you start to really process what words are being used in a form of manipulating us, it completely changes the game. It 100% changes the game. And that's one of the things that one of the projects I'm working on is just breaking it all down. So you've got this soapbox where they stand up there and they abuse you, they preach at you. And, well, it's just abuse. It's just abuse. It's not an argument. It's abuse. And there's a whole thing I'm working on right now on arguments, teaching, and how our culture on how we transfer data from person A to person B is a huge problem. It's all in my head. I haven't spoken it out loud in one big presentation yet. And it's something I'm putting together because I'm getting the scope of it. There's a lot that goes on in my brain long before I say it. And I'll do it right now because I've been meaning to break this down. So it's the elements of this is I noticed it's cultural. It's very much the cultural transference of information. And this is learning and educating. Learning is the process of consensual acceptance during a state of gifted vulnerability to allow the reception of information and knowledge. That is learning. The consensual acceptance during a state of gifted vulnerability to allow the reception of information and knowledge. That's learning. And it is done so through your identity and your subconscious mind via story and logic. Change the definitions and you abuse-proof the culture. Ooh, I'm going to write that one down. That's a good one. That's a good one. Change the definitions. Change the definitions and you abuse-proof the culture. Yep. So the education. Now then there's teaching. Education and teaching are not the same thing. Teaching is the privilege It is the privilege of X. This is why it's still in my mind, is because I haven't put it out on paper yet. It is the privilege of X granted by the student I want to say it's the privilege of authority granted by the student to offer information to a student for evaluation, who may then decide to reject, ignore, or receive. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Privilege of authority granted by the student to offer information to a student for evaluation, who may then decide to reject, ignore, or receive. the information and insert it into their cognitive core. Education. The transferring of information through informed consent granted by the student through methods of story and logic. Anything less than that is assault. So in logic, the very first rule is you have to define everything, which is why I'm defining these terms first. When you do logic for so long, it becomes so naturally ingrained. It's like, before we begin, let's first define everything, because you are defining the parameters in which you are working. And after you define, then it's okay. It is the transference of information. It is the whole psychology of what is taking place during that acceptance and reception of information. And there's a lot of consent happening, and there's a lot of non-consent happening. There is a lot of abuse happening and, well, threats, a lot of threats happening. There is the assault upon our memories as opposed to bypassing the internalization of identity and subconscious mind. There is the lack of joy, lack of fun, lack of entertainment, which is key in learning. There is a loss of comprehension of the requirement of the first, the second, and the third perspective. That without the internalization of the first, second, third perspective, you're not going to learn a damn thing no matter what. So you have people who are going through the entire lines of education without learning anything because they're not in the second perspective. You do not learn if you are not in the second perspective. Now, you can be in the second perspective mindset while you're in the sixth perspective ethically. But if you are not in the learning adventure perspective of two, you're going nowhere, nowhere. I think that's my problem right now is I want to learn because I'm in the second perspective right now. That's why I'm talking so much about this recently, is because that's where I am. I am in the student, I am in the learning perspective. And the minute you leave the second perspective, you're done, game over. And you don't get to the second perspective until and unless it's consensual and you feel comfortable enough and you're there by consent and there's no one forcing you. But that's not how our culture is at all. There's also the emotional transactions, the emotional transaction of human connection happening. And that's really where the trauma is coming from, is the emotional transaction of human connection. Non-consensual education is forced, non-consensual human connection. It's rape. Bottom line. And it astounds me when we're looking at social media. I literally this last week, with my work on this in my brain, I went, no. And I deleted all of my social media, or I removed all the comments. And the reason why is because you can't, I have consented to give you this information. I'm offering it. By you being here, you are consenting to receive it. I do not consent to receiving others because I'm the vulnerable one. I'm the one who's sitting here in second perspective showing all of my shit, not you. Therefore, to keep me safe, it's a boundary by removing the comments. And it is, people do not know the damage that goes on in social media, where you go in and you're reading a post. First of all, if you are not stable in the objective point of view, and many people are not, they're internalizing and they're projecting. They will go onto social media and read something and receive it without their consent, without their awareness. And they're not ready for it. They are not in a position at all to be reading the perspectives of other people, because it's altering them and they're taking in too much of it. They're putting themselves in other people's stories. And then they get to this point where they become offended because they've internalized it, so they lash out. That's where you get trolls. Excuse me. That's where you get people who leave nasty comments, because they did not use the appropriate boundaries before taking in other people's information. And in order to do this, you have to be second perspective. You have to be second perspective, and you have to be solid in your boundaries. And it's, you can't be both. You can't. This is intimacy. This is intimacy. Is if you're in a state where you're opening yourself up to receive, you also cannot be in a state where you are using your boundaries to defend. You can't have both. This is vulnerability. So when I'm in a state of vulnerability, boundaries are up, which is where I'm going, okay, no, you can't comment, because that is my protection. My boundaries are my protection. Your boundaries should be your protection, but people don't use them. So I can't be open and objective, so I have to have my boundaries. When I'm closed, now I'm objective, but I'm not receiving anything. I have to internalize it in order to learn. This is what's going on. This is what my theory is, and I'm still working out the logic, and the logic is almost done, so I feel comfortable finally saying it. I have a suspicion, a very strong logical pull, that the reason why so many people internalize is because they are in a vulnerable learning state where they're receiving information without boundaries. And because they are in a vulnerable, open state where they are pulling data into themselves, because they're in the receiving, vulnerable state, they don't know how to turn it off. They don't know how to move into objectiveness. They don't know how to use boundaries. So they internalize by absorbing everything, which is why they're in pain. Now, some people crumble, fall down. Other people lash out. That's kind of irrelevant. What matters is they're open. They're in that second ethical perspective stage. They're receiving, and they can't get out of it. They're stuck. Borderline personality disorder is this way. Borderline personality disorder is the second ethical perspective. It is the ethical perspective that has you stuck. It's being stuck in this in the second ethical perspective. And the first ethical perspective is the preliminary of narcissism. It's when you're over giving. It's when you're over wanting to help somebody. It's when you're the superhero. The first or the second ethical perspective, and this is when it's broken. This is when it's derailed. This is not when it's functioning properly. The second ethical perspective is borderline personality disorder. This is when you're in the permanent open state of receiving and being vulnerable, but you can't use boundaries. You don't know how. You never internalize them. You don't know how to use comfort effectively. And then the third ethical perspective is full-blown narcissism, when you don't trust anybody and you're lashing out. So where you are in the spectrum can communicate very clearly to me, that's which ethic you're missing. And it's all those first three ethics. Narcissism, abuse, all of it is just those first three ethics. So when you internalize the comfort to adventure to boundaries to integration, when you learn those things, it fixes it. You're fine. But when you get stuck in that internalization mode where you're constantly pulling it in, you're stuck. And now you're on social media. subjecting yourself to input. You should not be on social media if you cannot regulate your internalization, because you are non-consensually absorbing data that you cannot stay objective over. Furthermore, if you are in a vulnerable state and you do have the ability to be objective, okay, great, go on social media. But now when you put a comment out there, when you post anything, you are presenting yourself vulnerable. You are giving people your perspective. And people can shit on it now. Strangers. You are trusting strangers with your intimacy. That's social media. Now, I've chosen consciously, fully aware to do this, and access denied, no comments allowed, because I know what I'm doing. I know I'm taking my logical line, my mental health, my work, my everything, and I'm putting it out there. And I'm doing so in a vulnerable state. Now, any random stranger who I don't know or trust can come along and shit on my logic, my work, and my mental health. And they have. And I've had to learn. See, I have the authority. So I chose to become a student. I forced them to be my teacher. That is the power of the student. It's the student who gets to choose who teaches. That is the truth. So abusers are my teachers. Oh, you want to take something from me? Down, dog. You're now going to learn. You're now going to teach me. And when you have that concept, when you have that student mentality, now you have the authority, you have the power, you have the control, and abuse can't happen. But if you do not assume the role of student, which is a vulnerable open position, now you can be abused. Because now it's either victim or student. Those are your choices, victim or student. You can problem solve it, student, or you can be attacked and assaulted. And that's where trauma happens. You got to choose. And when I figured this out, I went through and I'm like, okay, no. I have two choices. I can deny you 100% access to any of my information and shut this down. I can keep all of my information to myself. Or I can give it to you. Oh, but there's going to be no comments. You can't have both. The only people who get access to me are the people who have made themselves vulnerable to me on an intimate level, where we're having educational discussions and we have the discipulous exchange happening. Those are the people who have access to me. And I'm going, all right, now, because they are giving back to me in a vulnerable sense, because they are sharing their vulnerable with me. And that's really what this is about. This is about sharing your vulnerable. I'm giving you my vulnerable, but I'm not receiving yours. So now I'm really at the disadvantage. And that's bottom line. People can come in, read my work, walk away. I've given you my vulnerable, but they have not given me theirs. I have not asked for it. And access denied. Comments are shut down. So now when I meet somebody, it is full, I know, human connection, which is an exchange, a consensual exchange of vulnerability. So when I meet somebody, it's a level 1 vulnerability, level 2 vulnerability, level 3. Okay, now I'm going to let you into my world. But they have to reach level 3 vulnerability first. And they only can come into my world via vetted referrals. Only, referrals are the only people who have access to me. If you're not vetted by one of my people and you're not coming in as a referral, you can't get me, because of how vulnerable I am. Anyone can go on, look at my podcast, see my history and go, oh, now they are at an advantage over me because of the information they have on me. And I've got nothing on them. So this was a huge authority, power, control of how am I going to balance this vulnerability, deny access. So now I'm really, really private, accessible only through the voyeur's window. And only through the voyeur's window can I be accessed, and access denied. There is no other option to keep me safe. So when you decide to do social media and you go online and you're commenting and you're posting, you are gifting strangers with your vulnerability. Think about that. You are giving it's more valuable than your heart, which can be replaced. True story. It's more valuable than anything. And we just throw it out there for strangers to shit on. And the more I was doing my work, the more I was making this logical conclusion in my head. And the more I'm going, Anna, what the fuck are you doing on social media? You are trusting a bunch of strangers with your most vulnerable possession. So I got off of Facebook. I'm now off of Instagram. I'm still trying to figure out how to do that. I'm on TikTok. So far, TikTok is behaving. And once it starts to pick up, I'm going to, like, so far I've gotten no comments. There's a lot of likes, there's a lot of views, but the minute it crosses over into comments, oh, it's shutting down. It's shutting down. It's not going to be shut down. I'm just going to block the comments. So these are the things that are happening that people don't know about. So we are in what we are in is a vulnerable transaction every single day. Vulnerable transactions. And that is really, truly what we're doing, is we are literally throwing our vulnerability around like it's nothing. And then social media comes along and just shits on it. And that is to understand how vulnerability works. And people are not aware of how vulnerability works. Vulnerability does not mean weak. It means open to receive. Bottom line, that is all it means. It means open to receive. It means disadvantage. It means being at a disadvantage. It does not mean weak. It actually takes great courage, fucking deep courage, to have vulnerability, because you are at the disadvantage. You are open to receive. Now, you can be this way consensually, or you can be this way non-consensually. If it's consensually, you're fine. Your self-authority is attached. But if it is non-consent, well, then it's rape. And you have lost your self-authority. Rape is the removal of one's self-authority. That's really what rape is. The removal of someone's self-authority. It is forced vulnerability. It is non-consensual and forced vulnerability that compromises self-authority. That is rape. It can be done sexually. It can be done through education. It can be done through learning. It can be done through conversation. It can be done through time. That's really what's going on. That. To say we are in a rape culture is an understatement. A big one. So I'm putting together this whole thing on education, learning, teaching, and putting in this aspect of what happens in our psychology when we are exposed to non-consensual education, non-consensual teaching, non-consensual conversation. And we are very sloppy, careless, and lazy with our vulnerability and communication. And we are very, very sloppy with it. I'm going to write that down. We are very sloppy with our vulnerability. It's this thing with the world. You look at it and it's just, there's a lot that, for me, it's a very illogical world. It's a very illogical world, which is why I call it Wonderland. And I look at it and I'm just going, and it's just people don't know. It's just ignorance. And people will bring things to me and I'll take a look at it and there's so much illogic in it. It's like, yeah, that's so illogical. I can't even work with that. And it's just logical purity. Logical purity. That is how I function, with logical purity. And I can't, yeah, that's it. I function with logical purity. And I can't be any other way. It's a real handy skill, but it also makes it impossible for me to mingle. Yeah. It's not a problem for me anymore because I've cherry-picked some really wonderful people who are just as logical as I am. So I'm having one of those days where I could just sit and stare out the window for like 3 hours and just conversations with the universe. That's what this is. It's just conversations with the universe. I have no plan for when I'm in my silent mode. It's something we don't do very often. Allow the silence. Allowing the silence is it's like the other side of depression when you're in the acceptance stage in the stages of grief. You've accepted it. That's what this feels like. It feels like I'm through the grief now. I'm no longer depressed. And I'm finally accepting all of my losses. It's my mom's birthday today. I'll need to text her. And that's it really is. Yeah, I'm definitely in the stage of acceptance. I wouldn't call it acceptance. I really hate that they call it acceptance. It's not, because acceptance happens in the beginning. That's why you're angry, is because you've accepted it. If you didn't accept it, you wouldn't be angry. You'd be in denial. So it's actually denial and then acceptance. And then you go through the stages of acceptance. It's not the stages of grief, it's the stages of acceptance. This is acceptance. And it's at the, not the impasse stage, reconciliation. That's it. It's not acceptance, it's reconciliation. And reconciliation is very much making peace with something. Reconciliation. Every time I hear the word reconciliation, I hear John Adams' voice in my head. Reconciliation, my ass. The restoration of friendly relations. The action of making one view or belief are compatible with another. Yeah, so it's reconciled. It's reconciliation. It's not acceptance. This is what I mean by words are fucking sloppy in our culture. So they're like, oh, it's the stages of acceptance. You accept it now. No, that's not acceptance. That's reconciliation. Acceptance happened. It goes, okay, so the 5 stages of grief are shock and awe, and then denial, disbelief, negotiation. And that's not denial. That's another word that they got wrong. And then it's anger. And then it's depression. No, it's not. And then it's acceptance. So let's break this down. This is where it's wrong. Shock and awe is correct. Yes. It's not denial. It's negotiations. And sometimes they call it negotiations. Negotiation is correct. What that actually is checks and balances. It's not denial. It's checks and balances. Because you're putting new data into your cognitive core, you had better make sure it is fucking right. So it's checks and balances. That's why we argue. That's why we negotiate, is because we're putting it through checks and balances. Are you sure this is the correct information? Because if I'm going to alter this into if I'm going to alter my perspective by adding this data into my subconscious mind, are you sure it's correct? Is grandma really dead? Because I don't want to put that into my cognitive core, go through the process of acceptance only to have you tell me that it was wrong. So it's checks and balances. And then once you get confirmation, the next stage is acceptance. Now, after you accept it, you do an inventory. This is real fast. This is like fractions of milliseconds fast. And then once you do the inventory, it's going to split. You're going to either be angry because you've experienced a loss and your resources are lower, or you're going to experience elation because it was a gain and your resources are higher. And then if it's anger, you get into a state of sad, not depression, sad. There's a difference, big difference. And then if it's elation, you come down off of that high and you get a low. So either way, you're getting a low because anger and elation are up here and what comes up must come down, and or for every reaction, there's an opposite and equal reaction. So if you're angry, you're going to get sad. If you're elated, you're going to come down with a low. And that low is going to feel like mellow. I like to call it mellow because you mellow out. And that is when you do a trajection. That is when you try and forecast your loss or gain. That is when it stops being a split and it comes back again. And then there is a period of observation where you observe your trajection to confirm that it's accurate. And then you have reconciliation. And that is the normalizing period between observation and reconciliation when you get used to, you adapt. This is the period of adaptation now and normalizing. So that is actually the stages of grief. That's not the stages of grief at all. And it's actually called the stages of acceptance. That's it. I don't really write abstracts much. I try, but I'm going, yeah, my logic is so solid, and it's fucking solid, that here it is. There's the logic. Here's the proof. And I'll write out the logical diagram, and I will present the hypothesis. Well, the hypothesis. I will present the premise, and it's done. I just write logical proofs. That's what I do. I don't write abstracts. I write logical proofs. And then I will do a summary with the logical proof. That's my abstract. And because I write the logical proof, I'm like, yeah, there you go. And then I hop, skip, and a jump on over to the math, the physics. For instance, with this, you have economics taking a place. That is what is going on with the inventory. From inventory down to observation, you're actually in economics. You are also dealing with, well, it's economics because you are dealing with surplus or shortage. Oh, this is totally the psychology of economics. And then you have your forecasting, your trajectory on whether or not it's going to be a gain or a loss for you. And then you've got your checks and balances up here with your negotiations. The I don't believe it. Now, one thing that we see often is within that millisecond of, oh, this data is going to seriously alter me and I don't like it. So if identity says no, you beautiful girl, then self-preservation will kick in and she will resist. Now we're getting into physics. This process. That is when the stages of grief occur. I'm going to say it's the stages of resistance, which is where depression comes in. Stages of resistance. So for me, on a mental note, I just finally got through this. It took me 2 years, and I am now in the reconciliation stage, which is why I'm so silent. There you go. That explains. That's the logical proof for why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. Yeah, if identity doesn't want it, she gets to veto it. She's the president of this whole shindig. Veto. She gets veto power. But she needs to feel safe enough. Well, we're back to that first perspective needing that comfort zone. Yeah, see, that's where you need your first perspectives in. So oh, identity is resisting this. We need the comfort zone. Resistance means comfort. If you are resisting something, you need to be comforted. You need to get back to your comfort zone. Yeah, I am finally reconciled. Not accepted, reconciled, because acceptance happened all the way up there at stage 3. What is this, any? So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 stages here. These are the 10 stages of acceptance. Yeah. When I hear the stages of grief, I'm like, wow, that's like a fraction of what's really happening. And that's only one of like 5 different options. It's very incomplete data. So you need physics, economics, logic, and psychology to break this down. That is it right there. This required knowledge in economics, physics, psychology, and logic, math, to break that down. Yeah, I'm definitely in the reconciliation stage. I am making peace with the universe, with my role, with who I am, and I'm going, okay. All right. I might jump back over to anger again later and then go back through it again. But this is the first time I'm finally in reconciliation. It's like you go through shock, negotiation, acceptance, inventory, anger, and then you jump back over to negotiation, acceptance, inventory, anger, and then you jump over to inventory, anger, inventory, anger, inventory, anger. I did that for a long time. And then you get down to sad, and then trajectory, sad, trajectory. No, I'm going to inventory again. Are you sure? Negotiation, acceptance, inventory, anger, sad, trajectory, forecast. Observation, nope. And then I jumped back. I've been doing this for 3 years. Anger, and then sad, trajectory, sad, trajectory, observation, reconciliation. So this is the first time since I'm finally at reconciliation. It's been a very long journey. And I can feel me going, no, are you sure? We're sure. We've been through this for 2 years. We're sure. Identity really doesn't want this thing. So she's been resisting it for 2 years, which is why I've been fighting it for 2 years. So yesterday I had a massive, okay, reconciled. And now I'm here and I'm going, okay, all right. So there. And this is where I really want to ask the question. Would this be a day where I would have called off from a 9-to-5 job? Yes, it would have been, because they don't allow this. But what if you're like in a recording studio and you have to be on a morning show every morning? What do they do? What do they do? Do they call off? Are they allowed to be human? That's really it. The 9-to-5 job is intolerant of human. That's one of my quotes. I need to write that down. But that's just it. The 9-to-5 job is intolerant of humanity. And that's it. It's intolerant of it. The 9-to-5 job, it's not just that. The school environment is intolerant of humanity. Our culture prioritizes profit and results above our humanity and health. Like, bottom line, that's the world we live in. Yeah, I don't want it anymore. I fired it. I fired that world and created my own. So I'm sitting here like, oh, I definitely want to be here this morning. I definitely want to do this. Identity is like, no, I want to do it. Okay, we're going to go do it. What are we going to talk about? I have no idea. We're just going to call it something random, like exploratory dialogues, which I think I'm going to use for code for. This is one of those mornings where I have no plan. Like, I never have a plan. It's all improv, but I'm just not, and I'm feeling it, but I'm not feeling it. It's just, it's going to be relaxed. It's going to be casual today but this is it. It's we hide our humanity from people. That's it. I'm going to go back to my quotes, but that's it. We hide our humanity from the world. And then we are plunged into this state of lonely isolation. And we wonder what's wrong with us. We hide our humanity from the world. And then we are plunged into the state of lonely isolation. And we wonder what's wrong with us. And that's just it, is we live in a world that is intolerant of our humanity. This is not a place for human people. It's not. I just keep coming up with some really awesome one-liners. This world was not made for human people. We live in a world intolerant of our own humanity. I write these up and then I put them on, like, afterwards. I'm gonna go write an article. I don't know if I'm gonna write an article. I am gonna write an article. I definitely have the article in me. I can feel the energy, the potential energy is building up, and I want to transfer it over into kinetic energy. So I definitely want to do that. Maybe I'll just work on math today. I really want to just do math. I noticed this with math. I've noticed this with math. I get into there and I'm in the schools and I'm going through it and I'm working with negative positive numbers. And I realized, oh, they're not numbers, they're integers. Big difference. Big fucking difference. Sloppy language. And because they kept saying numbers, I kept thinking, oh, we're working with numbers. And I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, why? What is the logic of A to B to C? And I realized that I couldn't comprehend it because they kept using the word number, which changed the definition. There's whole numbers, there's numbers, and there's integers. Completely different. Completely different. And so I'm sitting here going off of the definition of number. Like I said, I'm logically pure. And I couldn't understand it. So then I had to convert it over to, it's really nice to say logically pure because now everything in my life makes sense. It really does. I could not have a conversation with people without going, wait, the language is not correct. And then I converted it over to integer. And then I would develop my own language to make it compatible with my logic. And then I was using words that, and then this is where my trauma happened, is the words were coming in from the outside because of the law of reflection and mirroring. So I was mirroring words that were incorrect without my realizing they were incorrect. And then I had to correct the logical word. So it was just a poor vocabulary on my part. So it was poor vocabulary with law of reflection, with the actual logical line combined with, so now I'm in the process of cleansing out all of the ill-defined words. So I'm on this huge vocabulary spin of, I need to define all the words in my vocabulary bank. And when I realized the problem, when I realized, oh, I'm working with integers, that's why they're positive and negatives. And then I was able to flip it around. I love to do algebraic equations that's my comfort zone, is algebraic equations. And I put it all together, and and I'm also building, like I'm going through literally the same program my daughter's going through, so I can identify the psychology behind her program to see how it's compatible with her learning style. So that's what I do. I know my daughter is neurodivergent and she has ADHD, and so I'm assessing. And I know education is over here. There's what we think it is and what we're taught it is in the fourth perspective. And then there's what it actually is, psychologically speaking and logically. And then there's what they're doing, which is highly compatible with what they think it is, but it's highly incompatible with what it really is. So it works like this. My daughter comes in and she's like, it's all in Old English. And I'm like, yeah, that's because they're quoting Hobbes and Locke and Jefferson. So it's all going to be in Old English. And this is where common perspective will go, oh, well, you have a learning disability or you are incompetent. What did I say before? I said that abusers will alter the language that defines their abuse so they can continue their abuse in your ignorance so they can keep abusing you. As a result, a lot of our words today are incorrect and abuser friendly. So when my neurodivergent ADHD daughter can't learn their garbage, instead of them going, oh, maybe I'm incompetent as a teacher, instead they're going, well, you have a learning disability. See? Our language has been doctored to conform, no, to appease abusers. Our language has been conformed to appease abusers. And that's it right there. That's really it right there. It's like the ultimate for people go gaslighting. Oh, you have no idea how bad it is. You have no idea. And when you start to break down the logic of what's actually being said, it starts, you see it, the depths, the multiple layers of gaslighting that's occurred is like, wow. And it's all because basically we live in a society, and this is true. We live in a society where the loudest wins. We live in a society where the loudest, most violent or abusive, and wealthiest live or make up the rules. We live in a society where the loudest, most violent, and wealthiest make the rules. And because they are loud, violent, and wealthy, no one else can get a say. Everyone else is voiceless. And there you go. That's like, there you go. So everyone conforms to what the abuser wants because they're loud and violent. That's where a lot of these phrases come from in our culture. When I love the word woke, it's an amazing evolution. The word woke was first introduced back in the 60s for the civil rights movement. And then it was revived again by the Black people for their campaign, awareness campaign. And then a bunch of, I don't have a word for these people. These are the people who are shallow parrots. They mean well, but they're uneducated, so they end up parroting this campaign. And because it's trending. So they want to fit in. So they took the word woke and preppy, shallow, that kind of mentality. And then the fourth perspective, white man abuser, took the word. And now they're using it, slandering it. So now there's 3 definitions of this word. There's the original meaning, the trending meaning, and the abuser's meaning. And now everyone is going with what the abusers say it is. This is common. Social justice warriors, same thing. Social justice warriors started their campaign. Trenders, oh, that's the word for them. Trenders picked it up, altered its meaning. White man took it and used it as an abuse word. Now everyone goes with what they say it is. Do you understand how much white man has like control over this bullshit? And it just keeps coming back to them. Somebody will come up and say, abusers are assholes. And then the trenders will go, oh, I'm so supporting them. And then you've got the abusers going, oh, well, now we're going to use it to mock those assholes over there. And the word has no meaning. Literally, like this is the cycle, and it keeps happening over and over again. Over and over. Where somebody will rise up and say, abusers are assholes. And then trenders will pick it up, and then the abusers will take it back and say, this is bullshit. And they've invalidated the marketing. Over and over. They just keep invalidating everything that the abused keep coming up with. I'm waiting for them to get their hands on my work. Oh, I'm waiting for them to get their hands on my work. The emperor is naked. Really, really interesting. I'm going to go sit now, stare out my window, look at this really amazing tree, and contemplate about life, the meaning, and everything. Thank you so much, and may the kindest of words always find you.